We're live in downtown Grand Rapids. The city selected to host the first debate with all 4 Republican candidates for governor. Good evening, I'm Brian Sterling.
And I'm Marley Ginter. The candidates are inside our Wood TV studios right now. Over the next hour, they will tackle the big issues and fight for your vote.
Marijuana, guns, the Line 5 pipeline in Mackinac, no-fault insurance. It's all on the table tonight. We've invited a group of undecided voters to our studios, and they'll be watching along with you. We'll have their reactions tonight at 10 on WXSP and at 11 on Wood.
Now you can join the conversation right now on Facebook Live. Over the next hour, we'll see if these candidates convinced you that they deserve your vote in August on your local election headquarters.
From downtown Grand Rapids, the Republican debate for governor, live from the Wood TV 8 studios.
Good evening. Welcome to the debate with the Republican candidates for governor in cooperation with the Michigan Republican Party and being broadcast around the state by our partner stations. We're pleased to welcome the 4 ballot qualified individuals seeking their party's nomination. The rules of the debate are simple. Each candidate will have 60 seconds to answer each question, and each candidate will have 2 rebuttals of 30 seconds. Our studio audience are here as observers. They're invited by the party and by the campaigns. They're not participating, they will not respond or demonstrate in any way except for the end of my introduction of the candidates. So let's introduce the candidates. Thank you, gentlemen, all. Dr. Jim Hines, thank you for being here. Senator Patrick Colbeck, Lieutenant Governor Brian Calley, and Attorney General Bill Schuette. Thank you all very much. Ladies and gentlemen, welcome your candidates. So we begin with the opening statements of 60 seconds, and it was earlier determined by a drawing at the Republican Party. We would start with Dr. Hines. So Dr. Hines, again, welcome, and please give us your 60 seconds intro, please.
It's great to be here, and thanks so much for hosting this debate, Rick and Wood TV. I'm Dr. Jim Hines, and my wife and I have been married for 43 years. We have 7 sons and 16 grandchildren. I'm a medical doctor, a businessman, and the former president of the Christian Medical and Dental Associations for a long time, with 18,000 members. One of the things that I've done my whole life is I have put people first and not politics. And I'm running for governor because I want to make a difference in this state. We've made a lot of progress over the last 7 years, but we have a ways to go, and I believe an outsider can make a huge difference. My opponents here are term-limited politicians. Term-limited. 2 of them are career politicians. The lieutenant governor, he's been running for politics since he was 27 years old. The attorney general since 1984. I am laser focused on doing 3 things: reforming our auto insurance, education, and infrastructure. I am Jim Hines, and I hope that I'll have your vote on August 7th. Thank you so much.
Senator Colbeck.
Hey, tonight I look forward to talking about solutions. After all, I'm an aerospace engineer. I like to fix things. The bigger the challenge, the better. As a matter of fact, I dream big, but I also achieve big. In the private sector, I helped design the International Space Station. As a state senator, I led the effort to make Michigan a right-to-work state and turned around our veteran services from one of the worst in the nation to #2 in the nation. As your next governor, I'm going to focus on principled solutions that prioritize your best interests, not political solutions that prioritize lobbyists' best interests. I'm pro-God, pro-family, pro-life, endorsed by Right to Life in Michigan, pro-constitutional carry. In other words, I'm pro-you. As we go into this upcoming election, when people know my track record, when people know that my principled solutions go well beyond talking points, I earn overwhelming support. We've earned over 75% of the vote in the last 4 straw polls. Tonight, it is my hope that I will inspire each and every one of you to join our team. I'm Patrick Colbeck, and I'd be honored to have your support as the next governor of Michigan.
Lieutenant Governor Calley.
I want to talk directly to the people at home. I married the love of my life, Julie, right out of high school. I joined the local community bank in the mailroom, worked my way up to vice president. When Rick Schneider asked me to serve as lieutenant governor, it was to pull our state out of the lost decade and to lead the charge in implementing conservative tax policy. As a result, we have seen an extraordinary comeback here in Michigan. historic economic gains, real jobs for real people. And I'm working hard to make sure no one gets left behind. In the beginning, we were at the bottom of every list you'd want to be at the top of. We're at the top of every list you'd rather be at the bottom of. But what's happened since then? 540,000 new jobs. We hit a 17-year low in unemployment, and our kids and our grandkids are coming back home to Michigan. We have a choice in this election. Do we continue this comeback, or do we turn back to the career politicians and failed policies of the past? I'm Brian Calley, and I would be honored to have your vote.
Attorney General Schuette.
I'm Bill Schuette. My wife Cynthia and I and our daughter Heidi and son Bill call Midland home, smack dab in the middle of Michigan. I'm running for governor because we need more jobs, bigger paychecks, and more people in Michigan. President Trump has endorsed me for governor because he knows I'll cut taxes in Michigan just like he's cut taxes across America. We need to cut auto insurance rates because you're paying too much. And our third grade reading scores are lowest in America. When I'm governor, Michigan's children will read. As Attorney General, I fought human trafficking and put Larry Nassar behind bars for life. President Trump has endorsed me for governor, and President Trump's endorsement, well, it's huge. Whitmer and the Democrats, they want more taxes and more regulation. No way. I want Michigan to win and compete against any other state in America for jobs. Michigan must be a job state. And Michigan, it's time to win again. Thank you.
Gentlemen, thank you for your opening statements. I will remind you that these lights are indicating of time. When you get to yellow, it's time to wrap up. We have 60 seconds for each answer. I'll appreciate you sticking with that so we can get as many questions as possible, including this first one starting for you, Dr. Hines. Unless the legislature acts on its own to adopt a resolution, a ballot initiative to legalize marijuana, that will be on the ballot in November. Do you support the legalization of marijuana? And are you concerned, as some have suggested, that because of the passion of the people who do support that if you do not support the legalization, that those people may turn out in big numbers at the polls, consequently making it more difficult for any candidate that doesn't support that legalization?
I don't support the legalization of recreational marijuana. I think that would be bad. There's a ton of research that needs to yet be done. The interactions with medicine, what kind of cancer does it cause, the impact on memory, your ability to work. And so I think that there's a ton of work that needs to be done. But if it's passed, I think that we have to deal with it. And we have to know that the bus driver that's driving your kids is not under the influence of marijuana. We need to figure out how do we keep it out of the hands of minors. And so there are a lot of things that need to be discussed and worked through as a government to make sure that it can be as safe as possible. But I do not support the legalization of recreational marijuana.
Senator Colbeck.
Well, first let me be clear. I will respect the will of the people as expressed at the ballot box. So if they make it legal, I'll respect that will. But I'm telling you, I personally am opposed to it, and here's why. Right now, I have 31,000 job openings in my district. Businesses are still putting drug tests out there for employees. If you're smoking recreational marijuana, you're not going to pass that drug test. And I don't want our government assistance roles to increase. I actually want to get people gainfully employed so that they can get a good job, take care of their families. If we go down this route, I think we're going to see an increase in our government assistance costs, and that's not a road that I want to take Michigan down. We finally got our fiscal house in order, and this has an opportunity to actually bankrupt our state. It's not a course I'd like to pursue, but we'll make it work no matter what happens.
Lieutenant Governor Calley.
I do not support recreational marijuana, but I want to be clear that I will respect the vote of the people. I do support medical marijuana, on the other hand. In fact, it's becoming more and more clear that it may have a role to play in defeating the opioid addiction epidemic. But this is an opportunity, I think, for a clear contrast. Bill Schuette led the charge against medical marijuana, and even after the will of the voters was decided and the support was enormous, he still continued to fight against the will of the voters, keeping patients from the medicine that they need. So I think it's important that we all speak up on what we think about this initiative. But when the voters have their say, their will must stand.
Attorney General Schuette.
I'm opposed to the legalization of marijuana, but I think citizens across the state will have the opportunity to vote and democracy will prevail. I'm concerned about putting more drugs in the hands of kids. And the opioid epidemic that is raging across Michigan and America is real. You know, recently we had more prescriptions for opioids than there are people in the state of Michigan. And I was at an event in Oakland County last week. I met a woman who shared with me that her son had died through opioid overdose. And it breaks your heart. And we need to crack down on the pill mill docs. We need to, crack down on the heroin dealers that peddle this heroin to those who are in the grip of addiction. And I have an interdiction unit at the Department of Attorney General to do just that. President Trump asked me to come to the White House to discuss the issue of opioids and how the federal government and the states can work together. I think that's another reason why President Trump endorsed me as governor of the state of Michigan.
We move to our second question. First for you, Senator Colbeck. In the 4 years since the Flint water crisis, depending on where you're standing, there have been some improvements, there has been some progress, and there have been disappointments. There's been a lot of finger pointing. There have been a lot of recriminations. So starting with you, Senator, what did the state get right? What did it get wrong? And what still needs to be done by the state to support the people of Flint?
Well, I think it's a broader question about how to support the citizens of Michigan, to be truthful. But what the state did right in the case of Flint is that, number one, we fixed the problem. And we went off and addressed the emergency situation regarding water quality. The more we investigated, though, we found out that the less we knew, because we don't know where these lead pipes are buried across the board. And it turns out that there are 72 other communities with worse lead concentrations in their water than actually the city of Flint. So it's easy to understand that this is a broader problem than just Flint. As we go forward, we need to take protection of our environment seriously and protection of our water supply seriously. And I've shown a predisposition in my time as a budget chair on state police and Department of Military and Veterans Affairs to be very focused on metrics. And some of the key metrics that we need to focus in on are those metrics that are dealing with environmental quality. And I look forward to doing that as the next governor of Michigan.
Lieutenant Governor Kelly, same question.
The people of the state of the people of the city of Flint really deserve to have somebody that was on the ground working shoulder to shoulder with them. There are enough people trying to grab headlines or play politics, look backward and argue about the past. We needed to work on the future. So I moved my office to Flint at the height of the Flint water crisis. And I was just with people working on whatever needed to be done. In fact, I worked so much in Flint, I ended up filing a Flint city income tax return for that year. It was my place of work. And it wasn't just infrastructure, but it was healthcare and education and economic development and nutrition. But I want to make it very clear that the Flint water crisis has been politicized. The Attorney General has used it as though it is some kind of launching pad for a campaign for governor. The people of the city of Flint deserve to have an investigation that is apart from politics. Frank Kelly called them show trials. The most experienced, one of the most respected legal minds in our state.
Attorney General Schuette.
You know, Flint and the crisis in Flint is all about accountability and justice. You know, 12 people died. 12 people died in Flint. Kids were poisoned. And to think with arrogance you could try to sweep it under the rug and pretend it didn't happen, another rounding error in the fatalities of the challenges of a big city like Flint is the height of arrogance. Brian, you go around the state making false accusations. You're desperate because you're behind and you're trying to change the subject. And the fact is, people died. And I know families in Flint who still to this day drink water only from a plastic bottle. Families in Flint who wash their vegetables with a plastic bottle. Nobody in this room does that, but the families in Flint who are suffering through this. This is about justice. This is about accountability. And if I didn't have this investigation, I would not have been doing my job. I took an oath, and that's just what I'll do. Thank you.
Dr. Hines.
There's not a lot that has really been good dealing with the Flint water crisis. We've spent $23 million, more than that, prosecuting and defending. And for what? We have nothing. We're focused so much on the prosecution and defense, we've forgotten the people of Flint. We've forgotten them. There are over 5,000 lines that still need to be changed out. The people know that if you change out a line now, that there's a bolus of lead that can go into the water and poison a neighbor or another neighborhood. And yet, we want to take the bottled water away from those in Flint. I think it's tragic. I think it's not good. The emphasis has been on, well, let's move to the next city, let's move to another city, but these people are hurting, and we need to solve that issue and not focus on spending all the money, but keeping water there in Flint for those people.
Our first rebuttal of the evening has been called for from the Lieutenant Governor. You have 30 seconds.
Bill Schuette will literally say or do anything to get elected. $23 million has already been spent on this whole process, and they've stretched out the preliminary examinations over the course of years. And so when you consider that fact, and the fact that it's not just me questioning it, it is Maura Corrigan who said that these are inappropriate trials, and it was Frank Kelly who said that they were show trials. It might be convenient for you to say it's just me. It's not only me that is calling you out on this.
All right, gentlemen, again, we need to pay close attention to these lights because those will help keep us on time as we continue through this. So let's start with our third question, which goes to you, Lieutenant Governor, and it's kind of the same theme. And for people here in West Michigan, though we're being seen around the state, it has become something that we have become used to hearing about, and that is PFAS, also other emerging contaminants. There are people that are concerned about Line 5 and the Straits of Mackinac. There are a lot of environmental concerns. Some people think there could be an environmental disaster in the Straits, one of the largest repositories of fresh water in North America. So the question is, what would you do if you were elected governor about Michigan's environmental issues and emerging contaminants in a state that aggressively markets itself as pure Michigan?
We have a special responsibility here in Michigan as stewards of some of the most important natural resources you'll find anywhere around the globe. And so we have to be proactive. We can't wait for problems. So for example, with PFAS, the state of Michigan is actually leading in the nation. There's so many states that haven't even started, and yet we're out front on this because it matters that much. In terms of Line 5, I share the concerns that so many people around our state have. And I've come to the conclusion that we need to eliminate the risk of having the oil run through the straits in a way that it can be hooked or struck by an anchor. We had a feasibility study recently ran, and it has determined that there are other options. And so we need to take those options because the comeback of Michigan requires that we take care of our resources.
Mr. Attorney General.
You bet. Everybody in Michigan has it packed in our DNA, the responsibility of stewardship, ecology. 20% of the world's fresh water that surround our two wonderful peninsulas. Whether it's PFAS, whether it's Line 5, whether it's water diversion, it's a big responsibility. You know, it's Memorial Day is coming upon us, and people will go across the bridge, that 4.5 miles of straits where there are pipes that are down there, and I happen to think we ought to build a tunnel, a utility corridor where we could have all the concern and environmental safety responsibilities. We could be visibly, personally inspected. We need to make sure we also provide propane to the Upper Peninsula and our energy producers get their energy to market. You know, the other big issue here is water diversion. I'm opposed to diversion of water from the Great Lakes. It's too much important legacy for Michigan.
Dr. Hines.
We have over 7,000 toxic sites right here in Michigan that are not being addressed. They're leaking PFAS, they're leaking other chemicals. Some of those chemicals we know cause cancer. How do you pay for the cleanup? We've attempted, we've run out of money. What can we do? One of the things we can do is that Michigan is an international dumping ground, believe it or not. 25% of the trash that comes to Michigan comes from outside of Michigan that we put in our dumps. We charge 36 cents a ton. Wisconsin charges $13 a ton. We could charge more and use those funds to help clean up these toxic sites. I'm very concerned about running oil through the bottom of our Great Lakes. I think it's tragic. You know, a pipeline that's 63 years old is not as good as it was when it was put in. If it leaks, it's tragic. It can be a disaster, and we're responsible for keeping an eye on it and doing something about it.
Senator Colbeck.
Well, you know, my work on the International Space Station was actually, I was responsible for the environmental control and life support system. And you want to talk about a fragile ecosystem, nothing like living in a tin can up in space. And so I have an appreciation for a lot of these environmental concerns. And it's given me an appreciation for the fact that, you know, you sometimes have to prioritize what are the most important effects that you have to address first. And as governor, one of the things I'll do is go off and put together a prioritized list based on the number of lives that are actually impacted by a given contaminant. You know, I've got an issue in my own district right now where we've got a vinyl chloride spill that we've been treating. And the way that I approach that is working with DEQ and Department of Health and Human Services to go off and get the citizens in that area a clean bill of health, a peace of mind so that their property values can be restored and that they can have that peace of mind. And I was working with the business responsible for that to make that happen. And that's what it takes, partnership, and enforce what I call a good neighbor policy.
Mr. Attorney General, the next question begins with you. It's the issue of school safety. It has been brought to the forefront with a horrible shooting in Florida. And once again, we are thinking about how to keep our students safe in schools. And I want to talk about that specifically. What needs to be done to protect students when they are at schools? What is the state's role in that protection? And what part of that decision should be left up to local school districts?
Well, you know, when our kids went to public school, so did my wife and I. And when you take your child to school, first time maybe they walk, maybe you drop them off, later they drive their car. But you want to make sure they come home safely. And when they don't, it's every parent's nightmare. And that's what happened in Parkland, and we've seen that in too many occasions across the country. We need to do a number of things. Number one, there's a mental health crisis in America today. We need to treat and help people who have a mental health crisis. Cruz, the guy in Florida, he was trying to get help, but no one paid any attention. Second, we need to have more initiatives like OK to Say. OK to Say is Michigan's school safety initiative that we put in place by the Department of Attorney General, where it's a 24/7, 365 way. If you're concerned about active violence in school, you can call or text in. And also, we need to provide trained security officers, not every teacher, but trained security officers ought to be able to protect our students, our children in their school.
Dr. Hines.
This has been a tragic thing that's happened over and over and over again. And the question is, you know, what do you do about it? And I think it takes all of us to try to prevent something like this. And so when a friend or a neighbor talks about hurting themselves or somebody else, we need to be alert to it. We need to be able to notify law enforcement and then trust that they will do something about it, that they will actually act upon the concern that somebody's had. Certainly, behavioral health is very important. There are counselors in schools that know that there are students that are at risk for harming themselves and others. This is information that needs to be transmitted. I would support individual school districts deciding what they would like to do as far as resource officers or police guarding and protecting their school. There are districts in this state that police are far away, and so they have to decide what are they going to do to best protect their students.
Senator Colbeck.
You know, I've heard the arguments around mental health awareness, and I'm here to tell you, you're never going to know enough information to go off and rule out these scenarios with this top-down control of society, essentially. And I want to harken back to some sage words from Benjamin Franklin. He said, those willing to give up freedom for security deserve neither. And what we're at risk of doing right now is to go off and sacrifice some basic liberties for the sake of some false sense of security. And, you know, we knew everything we needed to know about the shooter out at Fort Hood. We knew everything that was going on. We knew what his intentions were. The key is we didn't act upon it. And we didn't have people that could actually go off and defend themselves. Let's go back to a tale of two scenarios. We had the Parkland shooting, where we had their school safety officer, Coach Heiss, act as a human shield for 4 kids. He couldn't defend himself. Maryland was a much different story. We had a school resource officer that was armed. We need to focus on protection of our Second Amendment rights and honor those rights.
Lieutenant Governor Kelly.
There's nothing more important than the safety of our kids. So I think we should take a practical approach. It's first starting with security at our schools. I mean, we have security. Security is something we've figured out in so many different places. So it's hardening of the building, but it's also monitoring the entire campus. And it's fail-safe communication with local law enforcement. I do believe there should be a lot of local control about the amount of security that is in place in any given place, in any given school. But it is very clear that our kids need to learn to live successful lives, and they're not going to be able to learn unless they're in a safe environment. So this has to be a top priority. If we want to continue this comeback, if we want to equip our kids to go out there and have hopes and dreams and aspirations and reach those dreams and add the next 500,000 jobs in Michigan, we need to keep them safe.
Dr. Hines, it is difficult to discuss school safety and mass shootings without talking about guns. And the question is the availability of guns. What type of guns are available? Should there be limitations on some type of guns? Should there be a way to preemptively take guns away from somebody who we think might be dangerous? Should the state of Michigan consider any of that, either considering changing gun law or the preemptive taking of guns to try to prevent one of these tragedies?
Well, that's a good question. I strongly support the Second Amendment. And so I think the question is, do we take the guns away from the good guys because the bad guys aren't going to turn their guns in? And so I don't think that's a solution. I do think that we need complete universal background checks. So we need to know who's a felon, who should not have a gun. We need to look at behavioral health and mental issues. That's important. I strongly support not only the Second Amendment, but the ability to carry a gun everywhere. So I would like to do away with gun-free zones. I think that those gun-free zones are places where the people that are in those are targeted by individuals that would like to hurt others. And so I see that my time's up. Thank you.
Thank you, Senator.
Thank you very much. So going back onto the school shooting recently that we've had. So there are two different scenarios. The one in Parkland where they had a gun-free zone and the school resource officer could only use his body as a human shield. And then the Maryland shooting where the school resource officer actually had access to a gun and ended that situation very quickly. It comes down to an appreciation for the fact that 98.7% of mass killings actually occur in gun-free zones. You know, when you heard about the Aurora, Colorado shooting, that killer actually went to the movie theater that was designated as a gun-free zone. Despite having movie theaters with more people that were actually closer to where he was, he went to the gun-free zone first. These psychopaths go to the place where they know nobody's going to fire back. What we need to do is put a little uncertainty into his life and let him know that we respect Article 1, Section 6 of the Michigan Constitution, which means that everybody has a right to bear arms in their self-defense.
Lieutenant Governor.
I support the Second Amendment, and also the Michigan Constitution goes even further than the federal Second Amendment in guaranteeing the right to keep and bear arms. This is a non-negotiable. So the idea of preemptively taking away a firearm or taking away somebody's constitutional rights, we really have to look at a due process where a person's a danger to themselves or others. The answer isn't to take the gun away from the person, to take the person out of society for treatment or incarceration if it's a threat. We have laws on the books. We just need to enforce the ones that are already there. But I do want to make one point, because everybody brings up mental health over and over again when it comes to guns and violence, as though violence is a normal outcome of a person with a mental illness. A person with a mental illness is much more likely to be the victim of violence than the perpetrator of violence.
Mr. Attorney General.
I believe in the Second Amendment and the rights of Americans and Michiganians to keep and bear arms for protection, security of their home, and sport and hunting and collection. My son and I are hunters, and I'm a member of the NRA and been grateful for the support and endorsement of the NRA and so many elections in the past. And now the Democrats in Whitmer, they wanted to, abrogate our gun rights. President Trump has endorsed me for governor. He supports gun rights, and I think that's another reason that he's endorsed my campaign for governor. And President Trump and I stand side by side in support of the Second Amendment. Thank you.
The Attorney General has mentioned a couple of times this evening about the support of President Trump. And this question comes from one of our viewers, so we want to get all of the candidates to weigh in. And here is the question from the viewer. My husband and I are watching closely to see who supports our president. It starts out actually by saying, will they, meaning you, the candidates, support our president and his agenda? My husband and I are watching closely to see who supports our president. we will not vote for a candidate that does not. Senator Cole.
Yeah.
So?
Yeah, well, one thing I've noticed is that, first of all, I think President Trump got some really bad information in regards to his endorsement. Second of all, the only time I've ever seen the Attorney General go off and support President Trump is when President Trump's in town or Vice President Pence is in town. I'm actually out there with the grassroots, actually rallying the base, making sure that we've got President Trump 6. And because when President Trump was under attack, under withering attack, even before he took office, I was out there in the Capitol steps making sure that he knew that we were supporting him and rallying the base, making sure that we honored the fact that we have a president for the first time in a long time that's actually doing what he said he would go off and do. So I fully support President Trump. I asked him to reconsider his endorsement, obviously, but most of the folks who actually voted for President Trump in the state of Michigan are actually backing our campaign. And it's evident at every single Trump rally you go to.
Lieutenant Governor.
I want to make it clear that I support the president. His success is our success, and I voted for him. Now, 2016, there was a lot of division within the family and within the Republican Party. But we all got there when it counted on Election Day, and he was elected president. I mean, even Bill Schuette served as the campaign chairperson for Jeb Bush. Used the word deplorable on Donald Trump before Hillary even did. But still, we all got there when it counted the most. And so as we move forward, it's about working together on shared priorities, things like tax cuts, defeating the opioid addiction epidemic, or now the Sioux Locks, which is great to have the president's support behind that Michigan initiative, behind that Michigan priority. So as we move forward, we need to work together in the interests of our people, and I'll look forward to working with the president as your next governor.
Mr. Attorney General.
I am grateful for the support and endorsement of my campaign for governor by President Trump. And he's invited me to the White House to talk about human trafficking quite recently, where now, because of a bill President Trump signed, gives the attorneys general and prosecutors across Michigan and America the ability to crack down on these bad actor websites like Backpage and Craigslist. And the president is supporting me, and it wasn't even a close contest, and I appreciate his endorsement. And Brian, the fact is that in October 2016, you renounced your support of President Trump, and look what has happened after President Trump's election. Neil Gorsuch to the United States Supreme Court, federal judges, rule of law judges across the country, and now with tax cuts, we're building the Ram truck. We're going to bring the Ram truck from Mexico to Michigan, $1 billion investment, 2,500 more jobs, and, you know, Brian, you deserted Trump, and the president knows who was with him and who was not.
Dr. Hines.
This is an interesting conversation. I have supported Trump from the very beginning. I have pictures, and I love the guy. I don't know why. I love him. I like what he's doing. I like the construction of a wall. I like, of course, the tax reform. Brian Kelly did withdraw his support from Trump, you know, several weeks before the general election. I'm so sorry he did that. I was so disappointed. Bill Schuette, Trump was not his first choice. But not by a long shot. He campaigned against Trump. And so there's a little bit of hypocrisy here. But Trump is our president, and I believe placed there by God, and we should be praying for him. The guy can't even drink a cup of water without being criticized. I mean, can you imagine not being able to do anything without criticism? So I would encourage our viewers to pray for him and encourage him. He is our president.
Our next question goes first to the Lieutenant Governor. In Michigan, there are a number of people that are paying higher rates for their auto insurance than any place else in the country. Michigan has the most generous catastrophic payout of any state in the country, and some believe that that leads to those higher cost of policies. For decades, Lansing has tried and failed to rein in the cost of auto insurance. Now, if you are elected, is there any reason to believe that that would be different? In fact, viewer Jeff put it this way: ask the candidates, quote, how Michigan can eliminate no-fault car insurance. Understanding that may not be your position, what would you do about no-fault auto insurance?
Our auto insurance rates are too high. The problem with the legislative initiatives that have been tried over the last few years is that they pile on 6 or 7 or 8 major changes to the system all into one bill. And the bill dies under its own weight. Everybody can find a reason to vote no. Instead, we should take a piecemeal approach to get things done very methodically. First, a fraud a fraud authority with real teeth and staffed up, one that will not only prevent or find fraud, but prevent fraud. Second is we need to referee between the insurance companies and the healthcare providers to make sure that they're charging appropriately and paying in a timely fashion. Both point fingers at each other. We don't need any more finger pointing. We need results. And then finally, transparency. When the assessments are put on our citizens, it makes it that much more affordable. We should know to the penny on every single assessment why, so that we can get at the cost drivers and reduce that cost.
Attorney General Schuette.
Our auto insurance rates are way too high, and we need to cut them and give Michigan families a big pay raise. You know, everywhere I go, I was in Hillsdale County not long ago and kind of had an open forum and meeting, and I was asked about insurance rates. And when I talked about it, that, you know, people want the rates cut now. We need to crack down on frivolous lawsuits, crack down on insurance fraud. Now, the Democrats in Whitmer, they're just going to go along with the status quo, which means, unfortunately, their position is that we're going to continue to be the highest auto insurance rates in America. We pay $1,000 more than in any other state in the nation. That's wrong. We need to cut auto insurance rates, and everyone's going to have to give a little bit, but we can't have the status quo anymore.
Dr. Hines.
It's interesting to hear career politicians talking about this, but because for 12 years, for 34 years, we've had no-fault insurance, and it has been bad. It's been expensive. It's the most expensive auto insurance that we have in the country. And so now we're proposing ideas, and I think they're reasonable ideas. We need to cut the fraud out. Well, that's a no-brainer. We need a fee schedule. You know, if you have a chest x-ray, just to have a chest x-ray, it's going to cost $65. If you're in an auto accident, it's going to be over $600. It should be the same price. Why that dichotomy? Why the fraud? Why haven't we been able to fix this? I think we need an outsider that can come in as someone with lots of business experience and say, hey, this is what we need to do. Let's get it done.
Senator Kobach.
Yeah, auto insurance is a pretty complex issue, but it boils down to two basic requirements, and that's where we've had the debate over the last few years here in the state of Michigan. One is you got a group of folks that want to make sure that we lower auto insurance. I'm with them. And we got another group of folks that says, no, we want to remain with lifetime benefits. I'm with them as well. So this is where this engineering problem-solving approach that I bring to the table as the next governor comes into play. I think there's a way to satisfy both of those requirements. And it starts with a simple examination of your insurance premium. Take it out if you're at home. Go off and pull it out there. It turns out that 58% of the costs and 58% of the line items that you have on that auto insurance premium are actually driven by state mandates. I believe that we can get a minimum of a 40% cost reduction while retaining lifetime benefits and get it as high as 60% depending on how we can go and approach the Michigan Catastrophic Fund. It's a huge opportunity to cut our rates by as much as 60%, and I'm the only one with a plan on how to do that.
We have a rebuttal. The Lieutenant Governor has asked for 30 seconds with his second and final rebuttal. So, sir, you have 30 seconds.
I just want to point out that the only thing that we heard from the Attorney General is that he wants to cut rates. But you have to have a plan. Speaking in platitudes, that's not how we got to 540,000 new jobs in our state. That's not how we hit a 17-year low in unemployment. That's not why kids and grandkids are moving back home to Michigan. You have to have an actual plan. Words aren't good enough.
Our next question goes to the Attorney General. Attorney General, the mobility age for the smart vehicles, even autonomous driving cars, trucks, buses, offers a future for Michigan workers and a new auto industry, a kind of boost, if you will. So how can the state do something to assist in making sure the next generation of workers, our children that are in school today, will be prepared for those jobs of tomorrow, because those are going to be high-skilled jobs?
Well, you know, that's a great question, because this issue of mobility is a competition between California and Michigan as to where the computers on wheels, automobiles, will be built, designed, researched, and manufactured. We need to make sure it's done in Michigan. That's why cutting taxes, and I'm advocating rolling back the grand home income tax that has cost Michigan taxpayers $8 billion. We need to be a place where jobs and paychecks are created. And secondly, we need to make sure that we have have auto insurance rates cut, and that means by cracking down on insurance fraud. It means by stopping frivolous lawsuits, putting a stop to the trial lawyers there. Now, mobility is part of Michigan's future, and it means that we have to have rules and regulations, that it's a prism of enterprise, it's a prism of freer regulations, so that we are investing in mobility for Michigan's future. It's part of a jobs and paychecks agenda so that we can have, you know, bigger paychecks and a stronger economy in the state of Michigan.
Dr. Hines?
I think we need to start with the basics. Our kids can't read, they can't write, and they don't know basic math. And let me tell you, if you don't know that, then you're not going to be successful in college. You're not going to be successful in a STEM program. And so the basis of being able to take these good-paying jobs really is the educational emphasis that we need to put. It's education. How do we teach our kids to read? We need reading coaches. We'll probably talk about that later, but this is so critically important. We mentioned the grand home tax. Go back to 3.9% on the income tax. That's $875 million. That's $875 million that we don't have as a state that we really need to put on our roads. Our roads are terrible. So we're going to drive these nice cars on roads with big potholes. I don't think so.
Senator Colbeck.
All right, we got to get back to educational excellence, which first and foremost starts with the elimination of Common Core standards. It's a failed experiment on our kids, and that started back in 2010 before I got into the legislature. I've been trying to get it repealed ever since then and paid some penalties for actually doing that. We need to stop the micromanagement of our classrooms. We need to refocus education on parents, teachers, and students. You know, when I was going to school, we didn't have such thing as a statewide assessment because we didn't have a bunch of micromanagers at the federal government and in state government to micromanage the classroom. And you know what? I actually got out of there, graduated, and helped design the International Space Station. It worked out pretty good. So now, we got to go off and restore an appreciation for what makes us really tick, and that is getting back into the basics of reading and writing and arithmetic, and start promoting programs like First Robotics, which are a great success. Matter of fact, my old alma mater is one of the finalists, and I got two schools in my district that are finalists in that competition as well.
Lieutenant Governor.
Michigan is the international leader in mobility. And mobility is really the convergence of the automotive industry and the information technology industry. It's happening right here in Michigan. But if we want to own that in the long term, we have to recognize that while when I first started, the biggest problem our state faced was not enough jobs. Today, what I hear from employers, whether it's in the most rural of areas to the most urban of areas, is that employers can't find enough people with the right skills to fill the jobs that are available today and the jobs that they know that they need for tomorrow. And so it's about education. If you have a good outcome, you have to have a good beginning, and that means ensuring kids start school ready to learn. It means making sure that every single kid learns how to read. We got to bring back skilled trades earlier in the process and bring it back in a big way. There is not only one definition of success. Our kids can take all different types of pathways after high school to live a great life. It's time to continue to come back through education reform.
Gentlemen, you're doing a great job. We're getting in a little extra question here. So I'm going to do, this will be our last full question answer, and then we're going to do a truncated one to take us to closing. So this one, you still have 60 seconds. Skilled jobs training is going to be part of whatever happens when it talks about mobility and the future. At the same time, we do need to talk about K-12, and we also need to talk about the cost of higher education, which puts that out of the reach of many people who would like to use those studies. What should the state be doing to support K-12, and can the state do anything about lowering the cost of higher education?
I don't think that money is the answer. We've put $1.8 billion into education in the last 7 years. That isn't the answer. I believe that we need reading coaches right in the classroom so that our viewers, any one of your viewers that perhaps you were read to when you were a child, you could be a volunteer in a school. We need reading coaches in schools with alternative certification. We need a plan. We need to be able to take 3- and 4-year-olds all the way to K-3 with a continuity and coordination. We need to educate our teachers. We need some sort of teaching program like phonics. I was able to teach my 2 oldest sons how to read with phonics. My dad only went to 3rd grade, did not learn how to read. I used phonics. It works great. But the basis of everything really is education. The foundation that we build on for jobs, et cetera, is the educational aspect.
Senator Colbeck.
Well, first thing we need to do is start looking at the expense side of the ledger in our universities. Right now, they've been running amok, and they only talk about the revenue side. And you know, when I got first elected into office, I was put through a legislative boot camp, and they paraded solution after solution to all the problems we face as a state. Every single one of those solutions focused on increased taxes, increased fees, and in the case of education, it's going to be increased tuition. I'm sorry, but there's another side of the equation that we need to start looking at. That's why I've been endorsed by David Littman, former chief economist of Comerica Bank, because I actually look at the expense side of the ledger. A lot of the folks at our universities aren't doing that to the detriment of our students. Now, I actually proposed something called the Enhanced Michigan Education Savings Program. This is a way of actually supplementing savings for education, not just for higher ed, but also for K through 12. We can put up to 50% more funding available per year into our education system with this program. So I encourage everybody's adoption of that. It's sitting on the House floor right now.
Lieutenant Governor.
There are so many different pathways that a child could take to being successful, and I'd never want to discourage anybody from going to college. It's a great way to go, but it's not the only way to go. Today, a child and their parents, they're told that they're failures in life, or they'll be failures if they don't take this one pathway, as though there's only one definition of success. Skilled trades and professional trades and apprenticeships and entrepreneurship and even the military. There's all kinds of different options that a child could take in order to go out there and live a full and successful independent life. Now, we're just practical about it. So starting with if you want to go to college, how about dual enrollment? The idea of getting college credits while you're still in high school, getting ahead of the game. I was fortunate enough to have that opportunity myself. Middle colleges are becoming more and more prevalent around the state. We have to be innovative, but college is not the only answer.
Attorney General Schuette.
I think education policy in Michigan is a four-letter word, spelled KIDS, with parents in charge, and they need to be the driving force, decision-making, and having options and choices where their child goes to school. If you look at Michigan today, we have the lowest third grade reading scores in America. It's outrageous that only 35% of third graders have the ability to read. America's supposed to be a place of opportunity, a shining city on a hill, but if you can't read the directions to get there, the future's really bleak. We need to grade our schools A to F. We ought to have grants to reward higher performing schools. I'll have a Michigan Reading Foundation where the business community and philanthropic community can provide transportation scholarships, because maybe you've got a child with special needs, there's a school with a special program, you need transportation. And part of this is apprenticeships too. Not everyone's going to be a software designer in California, but our students, whether they're workforce ready or college ready, they need to be ready in Michigan.
Gentlemen, this will be our final question. I'm going to ask you to shorten your answers. No rebuttal on this because we've got to get to closing statements. So I'm going to give you about 30 seconds to answer this. And I know you can't answer this question in 30 seconds, but I want you to give me one example of something you think the state could do if you were elected governor to combat the opioid epidemic here in Michigan that we know is also nationwide. Senator?
Well, first thing, you've got to stop micromanaging the actual interaction between a doctor and a patient. Some patients actually need opioids. You got to avoid going off and eliminating their opportunity. I think what we need to do is focus on the data mining at the source of delivery, which is actually at the pharmacy. That's the control source, and you can do data mining to see who's abusing it and who's not abusing it at that level.
Lieutenant Governor.
We have to start with the premise that there are no throwaway lives. Every single life has value and worth. And so as we move forward on this, we need to, again, take a practical approach. Make patients partners in their own pain management. Let them know what the risks are ahead of time and make the decisions with the doctor. As we move forward on this, we just have to make sure we're not throwing people in jail, but instead we're helping them get better.
Attorney General.
The opioid epidemic in Michigan and America is real. And I've been to a recovery center, and when you see people who are struggling with in the grips of addiction, it breaks your heart. As Attorney General, I've cracked down, have an interdiction unit to crack down on the pill mill docs and the heroin dealers. Plus, we have to provide more education and public awareness so that you can't arrest your way out of it, but it's working together.
Dr. Hines.
The emphasis has been on taking opioids away from people that are on them, and I think that's great. But we have to realize that if you have someone addicted on an opioid legal pain medication and you take it away, they're going to go to heroin and fentanyl. We have to be prepared for that because those drugs are deadly. And we have to be able to have physicians that can not only do counseling, but have the medications that are necessary to help someone get off their opioids.
Candidates, thank you all very much for responding to the questions. We have closing statements tonight. We will go in the reverse order that we began. So we begin with you for 60 seconds. It's television. It's a hard out. So let's stick with 60 seconds, everybody. And Attorney General Schuette.
Well, Michigan's future is about more jobs and bigger paychecks, and I intend to be Michigan's jobs governor. And President Trump has endorsed me for governor because he knows I'll cut taxes in Michigan like he's cut taxes across America. And tax cuts mean more jobs. We have the highest auto insurance rates in the country. We need to cut rates and give Michigan families a big pay raise. In our third grade reading scores, it's at the bottom. It's outrageous. When I'm governor, Michigan's children will read. You know, elections are about choices. Who has the experience, skill, ability, drive, and steel to lead Michigan? And it's a question about, are we going backwards or forwards? Well, we can't go backwards. We can't afford Whitmer and the Democrats, which would be a sequel to the failed governorship of Jennifer Granholm. No, we're going forward. We're going to go from good to great. In Michigan, I want us to win again. We can win again, and I ask for your vote. Thank you.
Lieutenant Governor.
We have an important choice in front of us today. Do we continue this historic Michigan comeback that we've been on, or do we turn back to the career politicians of the past? This is a stark choice that is in front of us. We've added 540,000 new jobs. We had a 17-year low in unemployment, and it's so low now that kids and grandkids from all over the country are coming back here to Michigan. You know, I love that stat, 540,000 new jobs, but you know what I love even more about it? It's the stories behind every single one of them. You know, I know of a young man who has autism who finally got a chance at a job. He's an auditor, you know, and then he bought a house. I know this young woman who came back from Chicago. She couldn't find a job here before, but now she's back and closer to family and starting her own family here. I know a man who got out of prison and learned CNC machining and has got his life back together. I'm running for governor to continue the comeback, and I ask for your vote.
Senator.
Yeah, President Reagan once asked for us to paint in bold colors, not pale pastels. If we're going to buck this 8-year cycle we seem to be trapped in, where we have a Republican governor for 8 years and we have a Democratic governor for 8 years, we need to stop painting in pale pastels. We need bold colors. And I'm telling you, we need energy in our base. And I'm the only gubernatorial candidate with energy in my base. We're the only candidate that actually went off and got all the signatures we need to get on the ballot without having to pay anybody to get on the ballot. Furthermore, I was the only candidate that accepted a challenge to debate 3 Democratic gubernatorial candidates at Tabernacle Missionary Baptist Church in Detroit, where I had an opportunity to actually talk about conservative values without the bias filter of the media. And you know what? I had some agitators out there. They booed me when I talked about the importance of faith. They booed me when I talked about the importance of the sanctity of marriage. But you know what? Other people were listening, and they rejected politics as usual. We need to reject politics as usual in this upcoming election. And I'm the principled solution governor. I hope to earn your support in this election.
Dr. Hines.
This evening we've heard how Michigan has problems. We do. We've also heard how 3 politicians plan on solving those problems, whether it's education, whether it's jobs, whatever it is. I guess the simple question I have for you gentlemen is, what have you been doing the last 8, 12, and 34 years? I believe that we need an outsider with fresh ideas, new ideas that they can bring into the political arena to solve these problems. I'm not a politician. I'm not taking special interest money. I'm an outsider. I believe I can get a lot done. I would ask our viewers to check me out on the web, which is www.hinesformichigan.com. That's H-I-N-E-S, the number 4, Michigan.com. I am Dr. Jim Hines, and I ask for your vote on August 7th. Thank you.
Tonight, something has happened for the first time during this election cycle, and that is that the 4 Republican candidates have come together in what is largely a statewide venue to talk about what is going to be next for the state of Michigan. I want to start by thanking all of you. I don't think anybody really understands what it takes to get 4 candidates to coordinate their campaigns. And without the help of the Michigan Republican Party, this would not have come together. So I start first by thanking you for agreeing to do this. Thank the Michigan Republican Party for coordinating it. And I thank you all for being here and following all of the rules that we had to do. Now, let me tell you, just if I may for a moment, why we wanted to do this and do this early on. As I've told you in the past, we were talking with the Democratic candidates as well as the Libertarian candidates, because this is a change election. When I say that it's a change election, because of term limits, there are going to be a lot of new faces in Lansing, from governor to lieutenant governor, secretary of state, the attorney general, 75% of the Senate, maybe 40+ members of the 110-member House. So who you vote for in August and again in November really does make a difference. That's why we will continue to do these forums, because we want you to be able to make the best informed decision when it comes time to choose the future of Michigan. This was the first step tonight. I want to thank all of the people that were involved, all of our media partners around the state for making this a truly statewide event. I want to thank the best production team in the state of Michigan for pulling this all together. Every department here at Wood TV who has worked on this tirelessly. And you know who I really want to thank? I want to thank the viewers at home, and particularly the viewers in the audience who, for the second time tonight, may now applaud your candidate. Good night, everybody.